Hello, I'm sitting down with this month's main gallery exhibiting artist, Janna Carter. We're here to sit down and discuss her exhibition, Light and Fire. It is here in the gallery until the 28th on view, so stop on down and check out her work. But yes, I have the honor of sitting down and talking to her a little bit about her work, her show, her process, life, whatever we get into. So welcome, Janna.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start, this show features a very large collection of both photography and ceramic work. We have over 170 pieces of artwork in this show right now, I believe.
Correct.
So one of my questions that I wanted to ask you was, what came first? Photography, ceramics? Does one inform the other? How did you stumble upon these two mediums in particular, and how do they influence one another?
First, I have to compliment you on the chicken and egg reference, but with art. I don't think that anything came first other than art influences as a child, and I guess really having positive encouragement from family, from teachers, and so forth. I have an article up here at the Art Center about when I was in 6th grade and I won a contest that the governor of Iowa was sponsoring. Went to the governor's mansion to get my award and have a luncheon, and my teacher had won for her age group. That's where it started, middle school, getting a scholarship so that I could take a class with all adults, and I was the only, I think I was 12 at the time, in a still life class for drawing. And then in college, knowing that I didn't want to do art for a profession because I knew I had to pay the bills, it was between architecture, landscape architecture, or architecture. It was between graphic design, landscape architecture, or architecture. And so you can tell from my exhibit that I have an immense fascination with architecture. Yep. That scared me off because it was a 5-year program. So turns out I did graphic design and still served 5 years at Iowa State University. From there, it just, graphic design the whole time, no time for anything else. I hadn't traveled much in my youth, and it wasn't until I became disabled, it was actually in 2014, but I quit as a graphic designer before 2020 and sold all of my equipment and kind of reinvented myself, knowing I still wanted to do something artistic.
So that leads me to, I know you have an MFA. I knew your graphic design background. So what was the catalyst that brought you into working with clay and photography specifically? So how did you made that pivot, and you clearly veered hard into this new direction. So what do you think it was that...
It was a hard pivot. Yeah. In 2022, I suffered a great loss in my family, and just having to pick myself up by my bootstraps and do something that was for me. And I decided that I would do something I had never done before in art, and that was clay. I had never touched clay. In all of the art classes I had taken in high school and in college, just wasn't something I had done. So Jessie was my first teacher. I also took classes with Lillian. Then I really got, passionate about it. I was coming in here like every day, as you know. I was a fixture, and I finally decided that it was time to go do a master class. So I went to Italy for a master class. I returned there a couple months later for a fellowship. I've done a master class in porcelain here in the States. And I basically tried to learn from every possible person I can. So I don't like repeating instructors anymore. I like seeking out new people to learn from.
Do you think that that's probably, I mean, I would imagine that's probably influenced your point of view. You do these boxes that I'm really fascinated with. They're very refined, and I would love to for the audience to hear more the process behind that, particularly, you know, your artist series boxes. There's definitely a strong point of view. Like when I look at them, I know that they're yours, but you have such a variety at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about the process behind these?
Yeah, actually it started with the booby boxes that are in the naughty corner / nice corner. That was when I couldn't get a nipple to go away. And I said, you know what, it's just gonna be a boob. And I started making booby boxes, practicing my closed form, which is what this is. You actually have a closed form first and you cut it open. There's a lip inside, so you have to create that lip, and it sits up here like this. You cut it apart, and then you have to hollow out. And if you're really bad at closed forms, it's very, very thick. So you're hollowing out more than what you see on the outside. From there, I didn't want to leave it at just a box. I did quite a few of those too. Played around with glazes, you know, that sort of thing. After I did my first sculpture in Jesse's class, it was a bookends class. I decided to sculpt flowers. That was my very first ever sculpture project, and then I fell in love and I started doing anything I could with sculptures. So the essence of this is it starts on the wheel and it's just a closed form or a box, but then it becomes something more than just a box. In fact, I would say that the form is definitely more important than the function. It happens to be functional, but like this was with orange clay, which is a long process to knead mason stain into clay, and it was just a box. But then I made it into a pumpkin, which is, you'd think, a fairly simple thing, but I hadn't thought about it until I used orange clay. This is blue clay for Cookie Monster, and there's little cookies inside his mouth already.
So when you use these different types of clay, like you're not using a glaze? When you say orange clay, there's no glaze involved.
The only glaze here is an underglaze on the stem. This is a clear glaze over orange clay. And you can tell because it's orange throughout. Top, bottom, you know, sides. The pig down here is pink clay. And what's really cute is on the bottom I did the curly tail.
Oh, yeah?
On the bottom of the box, yeah. This is green clay.
So you have some beautiful porcelain pieces over here, and they're so delicate. I mean, they look like if you touch them, they just
crumble.
Tell me a little bit about working with porcelain specifically, because it's so effective, and it just, you must come see these porcelain pieces. They're incredible and very intricate, but yeah, they look so fragile.
Well, those all start as slabs, and some as pinch pots. And from there, I mean, you're starting with a lump of clay like anything else, but the pinch pots, you're actually grating away some of the clay as it starts to dry to get it thin, and you still have to smooth it and that sort of thing. But that flower, the big flower, was actually formed around a balloon, and then I took the edges and just pulled them. I mean, they are just as thin and delicate as they can be on the ends, and it makes the entire piece look as if it's thin and delicate, but it is a bit thicker around the bulb part, just very thin on the edges. And a funny thing about that, when you go to take the balloon out, you can't just pop it, because the porcelain could be jumbled, or, you know, it could cause problems, cracks, that sort of thing when it's in the kiln. People say throwing porcelain is very, very difficult. I would say throwing porcelain is different. It's just different. You have to get used to the consistency. just like BMX clay, which is white clay. It's like a poor man's porcelain, very soft. And porcelain is so soft and smooth it feels like cream cheese. In fact, some people on their Instagram videos who do a lot of ceramics will actually throw cream cheese to show you how similar it is to porcelain. The thing I like about porcelain is just that beautiful, it's not even a satin finish, it's more like an eggshell finish. And you don't need glaze. There is one piece over there, I think, that I glazed, only one on the outside because it's a teacup. So I actually did white glaze over the white as well, so that I wanted to blend two glazes as well, so I needed the white. Other than that, they're usually white on the outside, glazed on the inside. I have two little luminaries that actually light up. That's another thing about porcelain that I love is the translucency. I wouldn't say transparency at all, but if you shine a very bright light, like in Hestia, the one that looks like flames, you will see that orange kind of come through. And it's really, it's beautiful.
I would definitely, when you walk through the show, pay attention to her tags and just see the variety of different types of clay and glaze that you use. I think that's fascinating, and you can definitely see the different effect that they all bring. Okay, so let's go back to photography. Obviously, you travel a lot. Obviously, you're very influenced by your love of architecture, which you explained earlier. But talk to us a little bit about the equipment that you use, your process in photography. Let's shine a light on your photography now.
Well, first of all, the camera that I use is an iPhone 14 Pro.
Oh, wow.
That's all I use. And I am going to upgrade to the 17 when it comes out in the fall. But I had my nephew once said to me, well, I don't know. I was asking him, should I enter this in clay or should I enter this in photography? And he's a photographer, and he says, well, photography is so much more difficult to win awards because everyone has a camera. And I said, well, I feel like I have to push back on that one. I've won more awards in photography than ceramics, mainly because I don't want to ship the ceramic pieces off different places. But B, just because you have that camera doesn't mean you're a professional photographer. And if you're a professional photographer, it doesn't matter what you use, it's using it well.
Right. Like any tool or piece of equipment.
Like anything,
yes.
It's a tool. And having the expertise, the eye, the editing capabilities is what goes beyond just snapping the photo.
Right.
In addition to that, I do a lot of perspective issues, like sharp perspectives. I turn things at angles. I turn them on their sides. Galleria Schiar, I took the photo 3/4 looking up as I'm in the courtyard. I spun around 180 degrees and looked straight up, and the lighting changed completely. It was absolutely phenomenal.
So what is your favorite photo you've ever taken, or the location that you were in, or the experience around taking that photo, if you have a good story behind your favorite photograph or moment
You might
captured?
know, just by asking this, they're at the front of the show, 59 Rivoli.
Yeah.
I think you can tell that I have a passion for that space. It's in Paris, at the address, 59 Rivoli, and I highly recommend anyone who goes to Paris who enjoys art to go there. It's an artist space, and it's 6 stories high. As you're going up the spiral staircase, each level between 1 and 2, between 2 and 3, and on up to 6 is a different mural. And so I'm fascinated all the way up, right? And I'm taking photos of each mural on the way up. But when I got to the top, it was really the aha moment, because as I looked over the edge, it was like this beautiful street photograph, people coming and going and doing their own thing, coming up and down the spiral. And I'm seeing like the top of a red beret, which is a focal point in that photo that I just love, and the colors of the actual steps. And you can see a bit of it looks like flames, but it's the crow's mural on the level below. But it's a really wonderful commentary on, people just doing their own thing, coming and going, and it became art. It wasn't staged.
Right.
I couldn't take that photo without people. The place was crowded. But at the very end, I go all the way back down to the bottom. I said to my daughter, who I was traveling with, wait, just one more photo. And she's like, Mom. And I said, just hold on. And I went and I did the looking straight up from the bottom. It was a very quick shot, maybe 2 or 3. And then I edit later which ones I like. But that ended up being a real star too, because now I have 59 Rivoli looking down from the top and up from the bottom, and it looks like completely different places. Yeah. The lighting is completely different. In fact, 59 Rivoli from the bottom looks like I used AI, or that I heavily edited the photo, and I didn't. All the color was there. Mm-hmm. In editing a photo, you bring out the color out of the shadows and the midtones and accentuate color. But my vision is to make it so that when the person looks at the photo, it's as if they're standing there. Mm-hmm. So the realism of the color is what I'm trying to achieve. Sunsets are really, really difficult. And I enjoy that challenge.
So tell me about your art box series, your artist box series, your boxes that are clearly representing famous artists.
Those came late. Those were near where I was having to wrap things up and just plain focus on getting 170 pieces organized for a gallery showing. I think the first one was Andy Warhol's Banana. The painting is of a banana, but I replicated that banana in the painting in a 3D form as a banana, and it sits atop a box, so it's the knob to the box. One of the things I love about that box is the black engobe.
You know, that's my favorite too, the black matte.
And the thing about black engobe is you usually fire a box together, and with this box you can see where there is not glaze. That's so that when it's sitting there together it won't stick, because the glaze will seal it shut. But with black engobe you can do every surface, any engobe. It's a specific kind of glaze where it can sit glaze on glaze and it's not going to fuse. You can do the bottom. You don't have to leave parts unglazed, so that which can be a little bit jarring, to see that seam. I don't mind it. This one you don't notice as much because it's the orange clay and it's either glazed or it's not. But that's maybe those two things about the Warhol box I love the most. I think the next one was Frida, and everybody loves Frida. Mm-hmm. So, the thing about Frida is that she did self-portraits. So I did a portrait of her in clay. I think that's a true, homage to Frida Kahlo, because if you tried to paint Frida, it would be as if you're trying to paint like Frida, or you're copying one of her self-portraits. It's very difficult to do a painting of someone who does self-portraits. But this I brought her to life basically, but in clay form. You can see my iteration, my rendition of
I love
Frida.
the Duchamp.
The Duchamp is wonderful in that it's fountain, which is actually a urinal, we all know, turned on its side. And I actually, out of white clay, sculpted that urinal and put it on top of a speckled box that I glazed bright yellow. And we know what that represents. There was another one, Magritte. Sisina Palm pipe, where, it's a painting of a pipe, and he's telling you this is not a pipe. That's the translation. But this is a pipe. Again, I took a painting, and it's a painting of a pipe, and Magritte is telling you this is not a pipe. And this box, there is a pipe, an actual 3D form. So there's some interesting, level of imagery there that honors that artist without copying. I'm not using the same medium. I'm just, paying homage. And I think Van Gogh is clever. The Van Gogh box, he was a ginger, so I did an orange chino glaze. But what's fun about that is the ear I actually sculpted out of porcelain. And again, it's got a translucency. If you put a really bright light behind it, it looks translucent like an
your ear, yeah.
Like a real ear. But the funny thing was, I decided that, most of these things are knobs, so you lift the box off using the knob. And in the case of Van Gogh, if you go to use the ear to take the lid off, the ear itself comes off, which is, he cut his own ear off. So it actually wasn't his whole ear. It was just, a corner of his ear.
So one of my favorite parts of this exhibition is the aviary with the birds. So I don't think I've asked you this, but I'm going to assume that birds are significant personally for you because you have quite a few. They're beautiful. The way we collaborated to get them on exhibit like this in this aviary at the front of the gallery was really, really fun. But what is the significance of the birds?
I have always enjoyed bird watching. It's something I've just been fascinated with. And when I lived in Cedar Rapids, I lived in the woods. So we saw a lot. I actually once was at Farm King or the equivalent thereof one time, and I saw a guy buying a bunch of birdseed. And I said, yeah, I'm here to buy birdseed too. And I said, what are you looking for? And he told me that, I'm trying to think of the name. It's like Woody the Woodpecker. I know what it is. Pileated woodpecker. He's telling me about pileated woodpecker that is like who Woody Woodpecker is, and Woody Woodpecker's likeness, and that it's like the size of a duck. And I said, geez, that sounds like immense and amazing. And he said, they are amazing birds. They'll also do a ton of damage to your house. And I had wood on the back side of my house. That afternoon, I happened to lay down for a nap, and I heard the do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, the hammering. And I look out the window, and there was a pileated woodpecker that day climbing up, I should say not climbing, hopping up the tree. And that thing was huge. But I went out to look, and I had looked up online what holes do a pileated woodpecker make. And they're these little rectangular holes, and sure enough, he had gone to town on our house. But when my mom was in hospice, we did an awful lot of wildlife and birds in particular as well, just observing out her window because she had a huge picture window. And there was a little downy woodpecker that came around quite often. So that was one that my mom really liked, was a downy woodpecker. I thought of her when I made that one.
Yeah, the birds are very special.
Yeah, they're really varied too. I mean, there's some horsehair raccoon ones, but I'd say about the electric kiln ones with the colored glazes, extremely intricate glazing work. I use actually car detail tape to mask off areas that I'm going to paint with glaze. And these aren't underglazes. I'm painting with glaze, which generally you're covering an entire surface with.
Right.
But I'm trying to create detail with Texas, an oil spot glaze. I think it's called, Coyote has a Texas two-step, they call it. And it's a two-part glaze that creates an oil spot look. And I actually used that for texture on a few of them. Speckled clay was another thing I used if it was had some flecks in it. But the Northern Flicker is one of my favorites because it actually has polka dots on it, like black polka dots. And if you look up Northern Flicker, it's a woodpecker. What you see is what I've done. It is an incredible, like.
And the beaks are so. I mean, they're just very delicate.
An artist friend of mine I get together with quite often, and we call them clay dates. We do clay dates. She said, "Oh, you're making me so nervous with those beaks." And I'd say, "Don't worry about it. I'll just slip and score it back on if it breaks off." But I found myself wrapping saran wrap around the beaks while I continue to sculpt. And I will say there are several colored clay birds. Yellow clay, there's one that's actually, the calliope hummingbird is white, pink, and gray, green, white, pink, and green clays. And that beak, I made a dozen of separate little beaks, and then at the end it's glued on. There was no way you could do a hummingbird beak and have it survive firing. So those are, I'd suppose some of my favorites. I think also the belted kingfisher. There's some wonderful kind of drips that happened that you can't plan for that I just think added to the beauty.
What do you learn about yourself through art and your art practice?
What do I learn about myself? The first thing I think would be I get lost. I get lost in my art, and that I have such a passion for it that, and the details, that I really get caught up in it to the point where I lose all track of time. And that's one thing I learned about myself, the hyper focus, but only with some other things too, but you can't do this stuff without hyper focus. The birds, I always, research, and I look at actual photos of birds, never sculptures of birds, to get inspiration. But the time aspect is something I learned, that this is a way for me to escape all of the world's problems. And the time that I spend doing clay, the world's problems melt away. It doesn't matter. And in fact, I would go down and I'd be in my studio for hours and not know what time it was. So I finally bought a cuckoo clock. And I hung it up so that every hour it would tell me what time it is. And I'll lose myself for an entire hour. I'll hear the cuckoo and I'm like, wow, it's already been an hour. But it helps me keep track of, the real world.
Okay, so we hang a lot of work in this gallery, and oftentimes they're framed, but not all the time is the frame part of the work. Can you explain your stacked frames and how that relationship between the photograph and the frame and the process of that, and you procuring the frame and making it your own?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it started with buying a frame that was stacked, and there is one in the show that is not for sale because I didn't create it, but it was my inspiration. I thought, I can do this. And it's not as easy as it looks. So the outside edge of one frame has to fit inside of the inside edge of the one below it. And you basically get down to a 4x6. It's hard to do much stacking at an 8x10. If you have two 8x10s, for instance, one sitting on top of the other, you have to modify the back because it actually does have to stair step down to be able to put a photo in glass successfully. But I started this stacking frames just as something to see where it went. So I would thrift frames. I call it frame rescue. things that might be in bad shape, and I repair them. I do the wood repair and sanding and so forth. Finding the connections between frames to be able to stack them so that I see the vision, right, when they're all different colors and they're stacked, but taking them all to a single color and brings it together as its own unique frame. And when I started doing that, I looked on Etsy and I thought, you know, how do I price these? And that was before my last show when I actually integrated photography with them as well. I had been exploring painting furniture and painting stacked frames. When I looked on Etsy, there's no such thing. I mean, I couldn't find any. I scoured the internet and I couldn't find anything with stacked frames. In fact, the one that I had bought that was my inspiration, they don't make that anymore. And you can't find it if you try to search it. So I knew that I had something unique here. But when I was doing my mini gallery show last year and I wanted to do some photography, I thought, well, I have all these great stacked frames. I need to paint them to complement my photos and put some photos in the show as well. And this time around, there was an awful lot of frame stacking and painting. I'd say one of my favorites is there's an address in Italy that is the actual name of the photo. And the frame is about this deep coming off of the wall. So it comes in toward you, and then the photo takes you back in along a pathway in Serrano, Italy. So there's dimension to the photos. It adds dimension. They actually stick out from the wall. I guess the important thing too is that the backs are never painted. If you turn it over, you're going to see the humble beginnings. You're going to see the glue lines. You're going to see every color of the 3 to 5 frames that formed that frame. And the hardware I try to reuse, the glass I try to reuse, because the whole idea is upcycling, to reuse and not try to create something new or use something new. I'm honoring the past,
Right.
and bringing it into my contemporary photography.
Yeah, it's very effective and very unique. So last question. If you weren't an artist, what would you be doing?
I wouldn't be doing enough. I can say that much. If I weren't an artist, I don't think I'd have the passion that I do now. I don't think I would have the insight that I do into all things around me, because I'm always looking for something unusual, different, unseen, little seen, rarely seen, for instance. That's Atlas Obscura again, is seeking out those things that the average tourist isn't going to see. But also just like with the artist series, trying to, how do you depict an artist? Someone who's a master in their field. Well, you have to kind of put yourself in their frame of mind, that sort of thing. And Aretha Franklin is a good example. That doesn't say Aretha Franklin, but what it is a hat that Aretha Franklin wore to Obama's inauguration, which is a very meaningful event. And he was our first black president. And Aretha sang at his inauguration and wore that hat. And as it turns out, it looks like felt. That was a felt hat. I didn't plan that. It just, the way I painted it turned out to be sort of, and it was underglaze. That's usually a solid color. But it just turned out looking a little bit like felt, which was kind of cool. And it was, a depiction of Aretha Franklin that isn't a picture of
Right.
Aretha Franklin, for instance.
Requires a little bit of research.
Yeah,
and-
Marie Antoinette, this is her hair. And Madeleine Albright, she was all about telling stories through her pins. And she would wear pins to make a statement with diplomats or secretaries of state. And that was her Peace in the Middle East pin. Oddly enough, I made that box I finished it a couple of weeks before the Middle East conflict. And it's oddly apropos.
Well, thank you so much, Janna. Obviously, you can see that this is a must-see show. It is on exhibit here in our main gallery every single day through the 28th. So be sure to stop by and check out Janna's beautiful work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.